Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt and welcome to this basics video about the Trammel. I've had several people ask me if I'd explain how to set up and use the Trammel, and so I'm going to do it today in two ways. The first will be using a manufacturer's own Trammel unit. In this case, this is one made by Festool, which has been designed to go with the jigsaw, and I've got the PSC 420 jigsaw. I'm also going to show you how you can make up your own Trammels, and I'm going to be using here the world's best medium-sized router, the OF 1400. And in order to make all of this work, I'll be using some of my trusty guide bushes which you see in front of me now. Now, in order to demonstrate all these techniques, I'm going to be making the lid of a drop box. And this is the drop box, and it needs a circular lid, and it has to have a channel underneath which is exactly the right size for the lip on the dustbin. It has to have a hole in the middle which is exactly the right size, because on top of the lid is mounted a cyclone. Now, the very first job is to cut a circle from this piece of veneered MDF, and that circle has to be 490 millimeters in diameter, or its radius has to be 245 millimeters. So I've taken the Trammel unit, which comes with the PSC 420 jigsaw, and I've set it to 245, and I've tightened it up, so that's ready to go. Now, Festool recommend, when you're using their Trammel unit with their jigsaw, that you use the jigsaw going in an anti-clockwise direction. They also recommend that the Trammel point, and there are two possible places that it can go through, should go through on the same side as the saw. So it's going to go like that, pivoting about the Trammel point there. So what we now need to do is to create a hole for the Trammel point. So we can see it going in like so. The saw will make a cut where this little indent is, and so if I were to draw a line like so, then that is going to be the path of the saw blade, because of the Trammel being set up like it is. But I've somehow got to start the saw cut off, so therefore I need a hole cut in the wood that will allow the saw blade to pass through it. But that hole must not damage the finished look of my round lid. I've put my hole through there, which is away from my line, and I'm now going to saw so that the blade reaches that line, and then I'm going to stop. I'll just turn the extractor on. So I've sawn up to the line, and that means now that if I attach my Trammel and then I just wiggle it very slightly, and now I'm attached, I'm ready to start cutting. But the problem with this arrangement is that every few inches I'm going to have to undo my clamp and move this around, and so there is another way. If I drill a hole all the way through there into my workbench below, I can now stick my pin all the way through this workpiece into my bench. That means I can release this clamp, and then my workpiece will move and I can feed it more or less past the saw. There's one slight danger, and that is I don't want the workpiece to tip up. And so what I've got here is a piece of wood which is going to go across here. It's going to be held down with two clamps, and that one there, which means now I can release this clamp like so, and my workpiece will move freely, but it won't tip up completely. And there we go, and there we have our disc. That's the first stage done. Now, my Carvex jigsaw has made an absolutely superb job of cutting that edge, and there's no need for me to do any more to it. However, what I do want to do is to show you how we would do the same type of cut, but this time using the router. Now what we need to do is to find some way of tethering the router so that it rotates about this centre point here and goes round and makes our curved cut. Now you may have seen my review of the OF 1400 router where I made this little pattern here, and I did that using this Trammel fixed like so, and I then used one of the threaded guide bushes fixed to the router, and then the router with the guide bush was positioned in that hole so I could cut that curve. So in other words, we could have a very simple Trammel device which consists of a hole that takes the guide bush and a pivot point. Now I've made something that will do perfectly, and here it is. It's a piece of ordinary plywood. I've cut a 30mm hole, which is the exact size of this guide bush I have fitted there. And all I need to do now is to locate the point where I should drill the hole, which will become the centre hole for the whole operation. Now what we need to do is to work out where we should have the hole for our Trammel point. That's the point about which everything will rotate. So the way I've gone about this is very simple. I'm going to put my threaded guide bush in to the hole, and I'm going to slip my ruler underneath so that it's just touching the 30mm diameter guide bush. Now I'm also going to put the cutter in here. I'm going to actually put it the wrong way up because I think you'll then see it a little more clearly. I'm also showing you a diagram on the screen. Now on the diagram we've got G, which represents the diameter of the guide bush, and we know that that is 30. We've got C that represents the diameter of the cutter, and in my case I'm going to be using a 12mm cutter. So we know that C equals 12. Now what we need to now do is to calculate how far it is from that inner edge of the cutter to the point where the ruler is pushed up against on the edge of the guide bush. Now the radius of the cutter is 6. The radius of the guide bush is 15. And the difference between the two, which is 9, is the distance from where the ruler is at the moment on the outside of the guide bush to that inner edge of the cutter. So that distance is 9mm. So when I now work out where my Trammel point is going to go, I take the radius that I want of my finished piece of wood and take away 9 away from it. Now I want my overall diameter to be 488, so therefore the radius is 244. Take away 9 and I end up with 235. So now I mark 235 from the edge of the guide bush, and that is where I need to drill the hole for my Trammel point. Now when we start using this with the router over here, it could be a little bit unstable, and so what I want to do is make it as stable as possible. So I've got a bench dog which I've had for a long time, and I've drilled a hole in it. I've put a 6mm thread through my bench dog, and what I'm now going to do is to push the bench dog up from underneath, and I'm then going to screw the screw into it, and that then will hold the Trammel point fixed to my wood that I'm going to cut, and also to the Trammel itself. And I'm just going to tighten it up like so, not too tight because it's got to be able to move. So that's pretty stable now, and that will allow me to use the router almost fixed here and then rotate my workpiece. Now I had to use my big dust extractor underneath here because of course most of the action is going on underneath the Trammel, and therefore you couldn't expect the Festool dust collector here to be as effective as it normally would be. But anyway, we've caught all the dust, and let's have a look at the finished product. Take it out, and there's our absolutely perfect circle. So you can see how it can be done with just a router. Now obviously before one did that routing, one would have roughed it out, probably on a bandsaw or something like that. Now we need to cut the groove on the underside of the Dropbox lid, and that groove takes the lip of the dustbin here. And I've measured the mean diameter of the dustbin, and it is 437 millimeters in diameter, which means its mean radius is 218.5. I want a hole which is 6.5 millimeters deep, so I first plunge down to the surface and lock there, drop this bar down and zeroize this little pointer, and then raise this up to 6.5. So I'm now ready. When I do a plunge, that's going to start the channel off at the correct depth. Now I have put these two clamps, one at either side now, to keep the lid still, because I'm just going to go around and do my cut in the normal way. So here we go. Well, there it is. My cutter is not a particularly good one, and so it's chewed up the edge here a little bit, but I can clear that off with a little bit of sandpaper. And there we go, that fits absolutely perfectly. Just the job. Right, the final stage is to cut a hole in the middle of the lid, which is where all the dust and debris from the cyclone drops down into the drop box. This needs to be 154 millimeters in diameter, and we're now ready to go. Now I'm only going to cut halfway through the material with this cut, and the reason for that is that if I were to cut all the way through, then this piece in the middle, which has got the Trammel point attached to it, would suddenly move, and I'd make a bit of a nonsense in the edge. So you watch how we overcome that problem. So there's our channel halfway through. I'm now going to drill a hole 10 millimeters in diameter all the way through. I'm going to put a round over bit in the router, and I'm going to poke it through the hole that I've just drilled, and I'm going to cut all the way around, rounding over the inner edge, and my bit I don't want will drop through the bottom. Here goes. And that's it, that's completely finished now. Ready to put the cyclone on there. Well, that's it, it's finished and it fits perfectly. Now we could have done the whole lot with the Festool jigsaw and its Trammel unit, and it would have made a perfect job. But I wanted you to see how to do it with the router. I particularly like using the homemade Trammel with the guide bushes, and the reason for that is that as you're using it, you can keep the router pointing towards you, and your hose and your power lead don't get tangled up, so it's very easy. But there is one other way. If you have the Festool OF1400 router, it comes with this guide fence. Just remove these two parts like so, turn this over, and then you'll find it's the perfect height to act as a Trammel unit, and you use this for the Trammel point, and you can fix it in any position you like. Brilliant. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.